Welcome to Whiskey Nightcaps, the channel where we do sip before sleep, and I am your host, Jason Davis. And today we're going to answer the age-old question of, is barrel-proof whiskey actually better? I think this is a very valid question, especially in today's market. But before we get into that, man, listen. If this is your first time here, remember that a sub goes a long way. Just a sub a day will feed a starving child. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and then slice, dice, smash, punch, whatever you do, that like button, because the algorithms stay hating on your boy. Let's go. I'm not gonna say we're gonna take a deep dive, but we are gonna put on the scuba gear and go into this. So if you're not a whiskey nerd and you just like reviews, I'm gonna go ahead and link here my playlist of reviews for you guys. No love lost, but check those out. But for everybody else, strap on those seatbelts, let's go. All right, I guess the first question is, what is barrel-proof whiskey? Now, I have been misled myself as to the definition, believing that barrel-proof whiskey meant that the ABV, or the proof of that whiskey in the bottle, is the same exact proof as the whiskey that was in the barrel. Now that's actually called original proof and not barrel proof. Barrel proof whiskey means that the whiskey in the bottle is within 2% in either direction of the proof of the whiskey that was in the barrel at the time that tax was determined. Now I know you're like, man, you are splitting hairs, 2%. But I just want to give you accurate information. Don't make me come for you. All right, so who was the first person or the first distillery to really put out barrel-proof whiskey? Most people credit the Jim Beam Distillery and Booker himself for putting out this barrel-proof whiskey 30 years ago. He was the first brave soldier to put it out. And though he does deserve credit as somebody who brought notoriety to barrel-proof whiskey, he was not the first. According to Whiskey Advocate, Old Fitzgerald, Weller, and some other distilleries had barrel-proof whiskeys out in the 50s. Now, the purpose of barrel-proof whiskey wasn't just to give the consumer a higher proof whiskey to get them intoxicated faster. No, in fact, it was to give you the ability to add water to this whiskey up to the point that was more comfortable for you as the consumer. So it's a value thing. That's why barrel-proof whiskey typically costs a little bit more than your average whiskey. Now, how does whiskey get to the proof that you get when you buy this bottle on the shelf? As we know, whiskey is stored in barrel for a period of years in buildings called rick houses. And depending on where that barrel is in the rick house will determine the temperature of that area and how that affects the aging of the whiskey. Now, the evaporation point for alcohol is 172 degrees. Anybody that has attempted to distill at home, you know that you have to get it to that 172, somewhere in that range, to leave the water in the pot and make the alcohol vapors go up into the condenser lines. Now, the boiling point for water is 212 degrees. So let's talk about this for 1 second. Let's think about bourbon. Bourbon being held in rick houses, which have hotter temperatures, right? Especially those barrels that are closer to the top of the rick house, because we know heat rises. So at this point, there's extreme heat, extreme hot temperatures interacting with this barrel that gets closer to that 212, which means that the water starts to evaporate at that point, and the water molecules are smaller than the alcohol, the ethanol molecules, so that water escapes from the barrel, leaving mostly alcohol behind. So the more water that leaves the barrel, the higher the content of that barrel will be, because you're leaving mainly alcohol. Stay with me, stay with me. Let's repeat that again. As the water evaporates, I want you to imagine it in your mind. As the water evaporates from that barrel, it's leaving alcohol behind, steadily increasing the alcohol content of that barrel. Now, conversely, with, say, Scotch or Irish whiskey, as they age, the proof stays somewhat the same or will decrease. It's not as hot in those countries, which means that as those barrels sit in the rick house and heat starts to rise, it doesn't get nearly to that point of the 212, but it is around that 172. So now you have the alcohol that's evaporating and leaving the barrel with mostly water behind. So as more alcohol leaves, the proof of that barrel starts to decrease. All right, so now imagine we have these whiskeys in glasses, okay? Another thing that is said about barrel-proof whiskeys is that they are more flavorful, which for the most part is true because you haven't added in extra amounts of water to proof down the whiskey. However, let's get back to our question at hand. Is that barrel-proof whiskey, without a shadow of a doubt, consistently, no matter what whiskey it is, better than a whiskey that has been proofed down? Now here's the thing. I don't know if you've ever had barrel-proof whiskeys before, but depending on how high that alcohol content is, if you don't add water to it yourself, you really can't enjoy it like you would some other whiskey that you drink neat. The high alcohol content desensitizes your tongue. You really can't bring in all of that on the nose or on the palate because the alcohol content is so strong. Most of us mere mortals will add some type of water to this barrel-proof whiskey. So in essence, at that point, it is not barrel-proof anymore, is it? Because you added water to it. You can have 2 glasses filled to the brim with barrel-proof whiskeys, 2 separate brands of barrel-proof whiskeys that may be close to the same exact ABV, and one of them will be harsher than the other. So what am I trying to say here is that each particular whiskey has its own sweet spot of ABV where it is the most enjoyable. So some whiskeys are not meant to have super high alcohol contents. They're meant to be mixed with some type of water to get it right at that sweet spot where the palate is just the most enjoyable for the consumer. I have all kinds of whiskeys in my cabinet upstairs, and I have some that are 40% that I enjoy way more than some of the whiskeys I have that, you know, are 60% ABV. I had this French single malt one time, and it was pretty decent, but I struggled trying to find that sweet spot. To me, it was just way too harsh to enjoy. And since whiskey is all a matter of opinion anyway, to answer this question, I'm going to say no. Barrel-proof whiskey is not better. Unpopular answer. Don't care. Don't come for me, Jack. So what do you think? Is barrel-proof whiskey undoubtedly, consistently, no matter what, better than whiskey that has been proofed down? Give me your experiences. Tell me, you know, what happened with you and your experimentation of this down in the comments below. Let's start this conversation. Let's get it going and see what we come up with. Thank you guys for rocking out on another video. We'll be back. Got some treats for you. I'll see y'all then. Peace.